Something is standing behind you. When was the last time you were truly terrified? The ancient streets of Edinburgh hold many dark tales. The long and winding cobbled paths, the location of some of the darkest chapters in the city's history. The old town's many dark and foreboding alleyways steeped in suitably malevolent history. Faces from the past reportedly frequent the locations today. Do the shadowy figures of Burke and Hare continue to walk the alleyways of Westport? Does the terrifying one-armed apparition of John Chiesley still walk a dark Edinburgh close? The Dalry landowner was tried for murder at the city Market Cross and brutally tortured before his fate at the gallows. Years later, builders would discover a skeleton beneath the floor in a Dalry property. The grim discovery reportedly missing one of its arms. Take a journey to Gillespie Crescent, Brunsfield, if you dare. The previous site of the grand White House mansion. The building is reportedly haunted by a headless phantom woman with a child. The spectre slowly materialised from the fireplace and screamed at the petrified servant who stayed within the room. The owners ignored the terrified member of staff and considered his story unbelievable, presumed the result of dreams caused by intoxication, the servant's character for sobriety not being remarkable. Many years ago, during renovation work in the building, a discovery was made. A female skeleton was discovered beneath the floor beside an infant and sewing needles. It would appear that the woman was murdered unexpectedly. Her skull was absent from the shallow grave in which she inhabited. The next time that you walk the long descent of the historic Canongate, you may care to look behind you. What could be standing, watching you from the vicinity of the pillars of Chesil's Court? The shadowy alleyway beside the Canongate pub may not be what it seems. What could be lurking in the shadows of its dark expanse? So remember this, if you will. The next time you find yourself in a dark building, in a dimly lit street, or the house alone late at night, beware, something may be watching. Beware, something may be listening. Beware, something is standing behind you. London Road runs from the top of Easter Road and eventually leads onto Abbey Hill to Portobello. Directly to its right sits a steep cobbled path leading to Calton Hill and Regent Terrace. The area previously saw the Greenside leper colony and other chilling tales. Windsor Street sits in the shadow of the dark and imposing London Road Gardens. It is a winter night in 1983 when our story begins. Have you ever heard a demon roar? The following account is a true tale of such an encounter that once told will never be forgotten. How do you start to tell such a tale? For everything that ever existed until the point of the experience pales into insignificance. For once you are marked by the presence of evil, life can never be the same again. I recall the night vividly, Hogmanay, a liminal time when everyone declares their good intentions for the coming year. I had no idea of what that stroke of midnight would bring. No idea of what would be waiting for me behind the curtain. Before I go any further, I would like to state for the record that I was not drunk. Now that I have clarified that, I shall begin. At the time, I was living in an old basement flat in Windsor Street, Leith. There had been a few strange occurrences in that property, but nothing that would have prepared me for what was to come on that dreadful night. The bedroom where the incident happened was furnished with floor-to-ceiling red velvet curtains, the kind of drapery that invokes luxury and warmth. The door to the adjoining room that belonged to my friend was open. She had already retired for the evening when I decided it was time for bed. Upon entering my room, I became immediately aware that there was something strange. At this point, I had no inclination of what this might be. I looked around, but nothing seemed amiss. Then my instinct drew my gaze towards the curtains. It was then that I noticed there seemed to be something preventing them from lying flat. Something big that was creating a large physical form to appear in the soft, crushed fabric. Without a thought, I lifted my arm up to pull the curtains open to investigate further, when I heard a roar that was so loud and primal it could have come from the pit of hell itself. In that moment, time itself stood still. Sensing danger, every fibre of my being wanted me to turn around, to run away and never look back. But my body was frozen with fear. The temperature in the room dropped dramatically to match my frozen physical state. The warm breath from my mouth hung in little white clouds in the air. What was only seconds slowed down to an unholy time. I was trapped in a waking nightmare until the sound from the beast abated. All the while, my friend, who was in the adjoining room, sat screaming in her bed, for she too had heard the beast behind the curtain. After that night, I never ever looked behind closed curtains again. I did have another encounter with the demon, but that, as they say, is another story. Situated between Lindsay Road and the long stretching ferry road is a historical North Leith location. Leith Fort was constructed to defend the port of Leith in 1779 to 93 after attempted conflict from an American flotilla led by Scottish-born John Paul Jones. The incident caused panic amongst the citizens of Leith, then independent from Edinburgh and without fortification. The fort operated as a military facility until the 1950s and later developed into housing while maintaining the boundary walls. On the border of the fort sits a lone remaining stretch of wall. This existing construction is what remains of the original Fort Primary School. Constructed in 1875 and designed by James Simpson, Leith Primary School served the local community. The school later became an annex when a new Fort Primary School was built across the road in 1967 to 68. Leith Primary School was later used as a sports club and was rarely used until its demolition in the mid-1980s. The building, it seems, was vacant, but not entirely unoccupied. In 1981, a fire at Wardie Primary School in Trinity led to its closure in the summer months. The building remained closed for months, and in that time pupils transferred to Fort Primary School. It was during this time that a terrifying tale emerged. The pupils of Wardie soon adjusted to their new place of education. Over the following 6 months, the pupils made new friends from the Fort School. One Wardie pupil recalls hearing a strange story from a Fort pupil he befriended. A story exists that some time ago in the old building a tragedy occurred. A janitor was discovered dead within the confines of the school. An unknown staff member found his body the following morning. The tragic tale says that the man smashed a solitary glass panel to access the long wooden beam, in which he tragically hanged himself. The ghastly discovery of the man hanging from the central pillar of the Assembly Hall would go on to be a legend for years to follow. Tales of a phantom sighted in the tower of the school circulated between pupils of the school. One pupil, dared by friends to climb the steps to the building, did not manage to complete the frightening task. While on the way up to the tower, the boy stated that something approached him, causing him to panic and drop his school bag within the confines of the dark and foreboding location. He refused to return and collect his property. Another pupil recalls attending a music test in the main assembly hall of the old school. The youngster spent the afternoon trying his best to learn to play the viola. His afternoon of demented screeching instruments halted suddenly. The chilling realisation that he sat within the confines of the ghostly janitor's realm. The much discussed hangman's beam hung directly above where he sat. To further accommodate the terrifying tale of the tragic janitor demise, a single pane of glass appeared absent and led to the ghastly wooden beam. Details of the phantom janitor of Leith School existed only in whispers during the remainder of the school's existence. The building ceased use around about 1984 and was later demolished. Whether the story of the phantom janitor held any truth is unknown. Simply a scary story and nothing more. Perhaps he never existed. I have asked many people over the years about the legend of the phantom janitor of Leith Primary School, yet to no avail. That was until November 2021. Through work, I would meet a man by the name of Gary. Originally from New Haven, we tread a similar path throughout the area. While talking about Leith history and its ever-changing face and gentrification, we found common ground from his time at the fort. He had even heard of a couple of supernatural tales from the vicinity of the north of Leith. One involved a soldier who reportedly walks the grounds of the old fort in the formation of a maze, never finding his way out from the fortified concrete walls. The other story was about an old school, a tragic tale indeed. It was the terrifying legend of the phantom janitor of Leith Primary School. Perhaps you have heard about him too, or maybe even met him. You have arrived at a once predominantly industrial area of Leith. Bonington Road connects with the long cobbled Anderson Place. Once the site of many bonds, factories and businesses, the road forms a desolate landscape. At the top of the street sits a large and imposing building. Venture inside with me now, if you dare.
So welcome to the Biscuit Factory. My name's Fiona and we took over the business in 2019. The original building was built in 1947 by Crawfords Biscuits and then lay derelict for about 40 or 50 years before my landlords took the building over. We've experienced some paranormal activity since taking over the business, and that's what we're here to talk to you about today.
William Crawford established a custom-built factory at Elb Street in 1879. The building traded as William Crawford and Sons from 1880. William Crawford constructed the warehouse in 1946, operated for many years to come. The company held the title of the fourth most prominent producer of biscuits in the UK. The company employed many local Leith residents, but does one still occupy the building today?
So this is our bar area, which is where most of the activity seems to happen. So there was one day throughout lockdown where we came in with our dog and he looked kind of a little bit alarmed. We realised that the door back here was ajar and all the stock was all over the floor as if it had been thrown around the place. What also happens is the bar staff find the freezer is opened every time they leave the room. They go back, shut it, they go back again and it's open again. I think Stevie's been up to no good in the bar again. How's that opening on? Huh? Oh my god.
Like many old establishments of its kind, the building most definitely has an atmosphere. Some areas of the building certainly more than others. With the Biscuit Factory now used as a multi-purpose event space, it would only be a matter of time before other staff members would have their own ghostly experiences.
So this is our backstage area, which a lot of activity happens back here. So during a wedding, one of our staff members decided to use this exit just so she wasn't cutting through the crowd. And when she was running through in the dark, she felt something kind of hold her leg and a heat travel right the way up her body. And she came running up the stairs absolutely traumatised and hasn't used this exit ever since.
I came in one morning and it was really early, so middle of winter, pitch black, and I was the opening for that shift, so I turned on the lights on and turned on the heating and stuff like that and opened the gates. And I remember it was a really creepy foam set that set out that I saw the night before, and I came in to turn the lights on up here and the button wasn't working so well, and I heard thumping behind the curtain, which everyone keeps telling me they heard stuff, but I wasn't really believing it. I was kind of just oh, okay, something dropping, and then I literally just heard thumping at the back there, and it kind of turned me into a believer that the Stevie thing is not really a joke. I heard some stories from other people as well telling me what happened, and I hear lots of thumping when it's just me in the building because I'm locking up, so I get text messages saying everyone's at the building, there's no other tenants in, I know that for sure. So I'll do my walk arounds and lock up all the rooms, and I'll just hear thumping or like pulling of tables and chairs and stuff at like middle of the night when there's no tenants in. So little things like that just tend to
The biscuit factory has now been reoccupied for some years. When did staff first become aware of the disturbances, strange sounds, and things going bump in the night?
So throughout lockdown, again, there was an archaeological team who ended up having to dig out at the back of the building here, and they uncovered a Vulcan settlement from the 1927s, and I believe they found old parts of railway line which dated back to the 1700s. When they were doing this excavation, there was a hell of a lot more activity in the building, so more banging, clanking, fridges opening, and the tenants seeing shadowy figures flying past walls late at night. So the name Stevie actually came from an incident where we had a dive-bombing seagull outside throughout the summer, who was also called Stevie. So collectively throughout the tenants and staff here, the ghost has now become known as Stevie as well.
North Edinburgh Nightmares visited the location you have just seen in the early weeks of 2022. The filming went well, except for the interview sections, which had to be filmed again on a second visit. The audio, although present, made no sense when previewed afterwards. Could Stevie, the ghost of Crawfords Biscuit Factory, have objected to her presence? Why not pop in and find out for yourself? Albert Street sits in close proximity to the one-time border of Leith in Edinburgh. High tenement buildings populate the long expanse, which culminates at Easter Road. An 1804 map displays the area as woodland and close to a quarry. Iron foundry and ground proclaimed to be property of Trinity Hospital. Our story begins sometime in the early 1990s. A family moved into a new build property on Albert Street. The recently constructed building would replace existing tenements. The property, adjacent to Morano Place and legendary Fairbairns off-licence, was a welcome change to the last house they occupied. Over the coming months, the family would settle into the new Leith address. As summer arrived, the couple would take advantage of nearby Dalmeny Street Park. Their 5-year-old son would command their attention and play for hours in the park until sunset. With the arrival of early autumn that year, they noticed a change in their son's routine. The once excited, outgoing youngster would now confine himself to his bedroom. He would no longer go to the park. When asked why, he appeared content with his own company indoors. A month later, an event drew his mother's attention to the boy laughing heartily from within his room. The woman, expecting him to be watching a video, was surprised to find him sitting on the floor and facing directly into the darkness of the closet. She asked him why he was laughing. Raising his finger towards the dark expanse, he replied, "The man who lives in the cupboard." Unconcerned by the events of the boy's imaginary new friend, the family lived happily in the property for the following year. Imaginary friends are commonplace with children, and their son continued to play happily for hours within the bedroom. An offer of a house exchange materialised in the spring. The family swapped places with the man's sister and moved to Spey Terrace. The property in Spey Terrace was not only larger but less expensive than their current house. The boy never mentioned his imaginary friend, the man who lives in the cupboard, ever again. Sometime later, both families would attend a party at the nearby Hibs Club. The man was surprised at the frosty reception from his sister. After a while, she would finally declare the problem to her bewildered brother. She accused him of being duped and misled into the move to the Albert Street property. It was not a simple case of a faulty boiler, faulty plumbing, or even disruptive neighbours. His thoroughly irate sister insisted that the house in which she now occupied was most definitely haunted. Her outgoing and socially active 7-year-old daughter had drastically changed since the move. The girl no longer attended out-of-school activities. She had no time now for her close circle of friends. The youngster had grown reclusive, yet remained cheerful and content. Content to spend time with her newfound imaginary friend. The girl insists, talks to her from the corner of her bedroom, and he lives in the cupboard. She never lasted long in the Albert Street address. Her brother, who relayed the story to me, reckons 6 months maximum, but hasn't seen her in years. The exact address, I will not disclose, appears still occupied today. I wonder if the current residents have contact with their previous owner, who seems to have never moved out. The same resident who makes the children laugh. The man who lives in the cupboard. In the summer months of 1999, a young girl met with a terrifying encounter in a Leith address. To 7-year-old Jade Capasso, the dark figure who greeted her on the Dalmeny Street stairwell would haunt her for many years to come. Ghost Club Paranormal explores and investigates the many haunted locations of America. Jade states that her frightening Leith encounter would be the catalyst for her interest in the paranormal. Just a stone throw away sits Iona Street. The large tenement buildings dominate the Leith skyline and reflect the many stories of Leithers past and present. It is an address in this street where a terrifying incident occurred.
In October 2007, I just moved into a flat in Iona Street with my girlfriend at the time. One afternoon, she went for a nap in the bedroom and I went to make myself a cup of tea in the kitchen. Walking up the hallway, I got the sense of someone swishing across the hall in front of me into the living room. I assumed this was my girlfriend, but when I went into the living room, it was empty. Checking on her in the bedroom, she was fast asleep. I didn't actually get a good look at this person, more a sense of someone with long dark hair and wearing a long skirt or dress swishing across the hallway in front of me, but I couldn't make out clear features. A couple of days later, we were in bed early in the morning and we heard our front door open. We could hear the sound of someone walking up the hallway. Getting out of bed, opened the bedroom door to find an empty hall. We stayed there for a number of years afterwards, but these were the only 2 weird events that occurred.
We now look at 2 separate maps of the area. They display possible clues to the paranormal events. When confronted with the first aerial map from 1804, the site was shown as property of Heriot's and Trinity Hospitals. In the centre is Nether Quarryholes Farm. Many years later, when the building of the streets was completed, we observed a bizarre coincidence. The properties on Albert Street, Iona Street and Dalmeny Street, when joined together, form a near-perfect straight line. What could be the connecting factor? Could there be more instances of paranormal activity in the adjoining streets yet to be discovered? We may find out more terrifying supernatural events from the Leith area one day. Easter Road is so called as it was known as the Eastern Road to Leith. As maps of Edinburgh in the late 18th century show, it had a counterpart in Wester Road, now Broughton Road and Bonington Road. Until the creation of Leith Walk in the middle of the 17th century, these were the two main routes from Leith to Edinburgh. Historic titles that have visited Easter Road have included Mary Queen of Scots, 1561, and Oliver Cromwell from Leith Links in 1650. At the top of Easter Road sits a once grand building, its concrete decorated facade portraying the date 1879 sits atop the building frontage. The ground floor section became the 600 capacity Picturedrome Cinema in 1912. The cinema served the local area and in 1943 changed its name to the Eastway. The building was one of the last Edinburgh cinemas to use gaslight. The cinema closed in 1961 and has remained as a food store since. Situated directly above, on the first floor, sits Elgin House Masonic Hall. The entrance sits between the front of the building, directly between the shop fronts. Both the Masonic Hall and the new Iceland store share one specific area. This section, situated at the rear of the property, holds a chilling legacy. One that I shall share with you today. To the staff of Iceland Easter Road, a section of the store exists they do not visit alone. Situated at the rear of the store is a dark and uninviting tunnel. The area, shared by the Masonic Hall, leads away from the walk-in freezers and is adjacent to a steep flight of steps. A previous staff member who worked in the store recalls her complete hesitation to work in the vicinity of the passageway. It was constantly cold, freezing if you like. Even in the vicinity of the walk-in chillers, this area remained cold throughout. It wasn't just the cold atmosphere that made it an unwelcome place to work. It was the sights and sounds that would terrify staff constantly. On more than one occasion, voices have been heard from the end of the passageway. They were not just the sound of somebody in the back street, but multiple voices whispering in the darkness. It was suitably terrifying and would always catch you off guard, and when you least expected it. I was one of many staff from the shop who have encountered such chilling events from the dark, cold tunnel. I recently spoke to a witness who recalls attending screenings at the cinema in the 1950s. I remember seeing Seven Brides for Seven Brothers at the Eastway Cinema at the top of Easter Road some time back in the 1950s. It was a pleasant enough cinema and not one you would describe as a flea pit. Could the chilling events be connected to the days of the building being used as a cinema? I can't recall anything spooky or unusual from my visits. The passageway still exists today, but from what I gather, rarely used by staff of the store. The mystery of the whispering voices in the day and night that echo along the tunnel and the constant coldness. Could this be another of Leith's many unexplained mysteries? It's getting dark as evening calls, the chiming of the clock. The amber glow of streetlights flood the paths that you now walk. Dark alleyways and closes form a shape now out of view. Does something walk behind? Is it standing next to you?